Speaking is an affirmation. This just to tell you a little more about this, David Eby, who many of you know. David Eby is the man who's the director of Ananda Music worldwide. He's worked with Swami Kriyananda and his music, all of the music that you're hearing today and that you hear every Sunday for years. And there's just the most, it's perfect, of course, it's perfect. This man works through pure inspiration. I have no idea, can you hear me in the back? I have no idea where David was when he first met Swamiji. But I know that the minute he met Swamiji, he knew he was somebody that he wanted to be with, learn from, serve with. So at least he was conscious and aware. But at this moment in his life, at this time now, he works from just a place of pure inspiration. In fact, his program about last night at the church was called something about that. I don't remember the exact title. Some of you were there, but basically about doing music and all performance, whatever it is, from a place of inspiration, not from a place of knowledge and learning, which is really what this talk is about. And he's so inspiring. So he said to us at one point, listen while I play this prelude on his cello. And it was so beautiful. It's very hard to put this into words, but it came right into our hearts. And many of us who were there found ourselves just spontaneously crying. But then he said, now I just want to do some measured breathing. He said, I'm going to have you breathe in to a count of 6, hold it, and I want you to and meditate for less than a minute after that. We did that measured breathing 3 times, and we meditated for less than a minute, and then he played the prelude again. And I'm going to come back and tell you what happened then. But in the middle of all of that, his computer fails. Here we are in these moments of great inspiration, and I thought, oh, I'm not the only one. He's up there having to reboot and go through all of the issues with all of these electronics. But really his program last night and what happened after that is very much to the point of what this whole reading is about. What he did with us in terms of breathing and meditating, I don't think took more than 2 minutes. It was 2 minutes. And again, yeah, Sam's saying to me, yes. And then he played that same prelude, which had moved all of us. And I mean, enormously the first time through. But then we were able to have this experience, and I think it was universal in the room because several people spoke to it. I did not. But before anybody spoke, I said to myself, what just happened was that I felt the music beyond the notes. That's what I said, and I just remembered, which I didn't know last night, that was the title of his talk, Beyond the Notes, because he, with less than 2 minutes of spiritual practice, he took us to that place where first you would feel the music in parts of your body that you wouldn't typically feel music. And I could feel it in my fingertips, and then it left my fingertips. And it was beyond me, and it was beyond anything that he was playing, because he moved us from a place of listening with our mind, from a place of mind consciousness to soul consciousness in just that short period of time. And it was such a beautiful example because this man has spent years studying music, years. And he's a professional performer and teacher. That's what he does. But he's also been meditating for many years, and he's been on a spiritual path for lifetimes. And the difference between where he was able to take us, he was showing us a wonderful PowerPoint presentation until his computer went out. We got it back. But even as beautifully done as that program was, from a place of inspiration, appealing to our minds or appealing to our souls, I'm not going to speak much more about David other than to say he's coming back in June. He does programs in many places. It doesn't matter if you're a musician or not. He is the embodiment and such a beautiful manifestation of what Swami Kriyananda is trying to show us in this reading today. Now, this reading is kind of, it's deceptively simple, because I think most of us sitting in this room, certainly anybody who's been to even a couple of Sunday services or a class anywhere at Ananda, would be able to answer the question, through learning, can man find God, or whatever the exact title of the talk is. We would all say, of course not. I mean, we know that. So it's very simple, but it came to me last night that part of what is necessary to be able to grasp the full meaning of these lessons and of these talks, as Swamiji writes the readings and then we expound on them, it has to be sort of presupposed, if you will, that people actually want to find something else in their lives. That people are actually interested in, we can use whatever words we want, I mean growing, expanding. We don't have to use as complicated words as finding God, because that means something so different to each of us, or realizing our oneness. But if you're perfectly happy where your life is, then the answer to these questions and the response to these readings is totally different. And of course, I realize that. We probably all realize that. I've taught a lot. I've spoken about many of these readings at least several times now. And people come up to me afterwards and they say things to me like, boy, I really loved what you said and what you meant about, and they tell me, and I think to myself, did I say that? Maybe I did, because, you know, really you speak from a place of inspiration, hopefully when you're up here. But it's remarkable how differently we all hear these teachings, and how, you know, we're all only going to hear what we're ready to hear, and of course that's perfect. That's exactly what we're doing on a spiritual path. When that thought came to me last night or this morning, that I was thinking, boy, this is a relatively easy reading. And then I thought, that really depends on where you are, where your consciousness is. It came to me instantly that in my late 30s, so that was now 30 years ago for me, in my late 30s, I was already on a spiritual path. In fact, I was already on this path. But I was also very much out into the world. I was a woman in my 30s and, you know, attractive and playful and bright and just coming into medicine and just many things. And I mean, loving my life, really loving my life. And I remember so often saying to myself, and I don't think I've ever said this out loud before, and particularly when it's being recorded, but I used to say to myself, why is everybody so focused on not wanting to come back? I can't wait to come back. I used to say to myself, this is so much fun. And it was. So I'm poking fun at myself, if you will, just to say, wherever we are, we are. And I get it when people haven't quite moved to a place of really praying and doing everything we can do to see if we could make this our last life. It was just 30 years ago, not that long ago, when you think of it in the course of Master telling us 10 million lives, maybe just to get to a human birth. That's a huge amount of time. So 30 years ago, it sounds like nothing. I'll just share with some of you an interesting thing that I've just heard Davy say, and I think I mentioned this in Palo Alto since so many of you here are from there, but it was so fascinating to me in terms of learning these spiritual lessons. Davy said that Master had said once that if you look at a clock, just a regular clock, round clock, that all of us anybody who's on a spiritual search consciously at all. And that includes every one of us in this room, because whatever brought us here, we're looking for something, a place to grow into spiritually, is the last 4 seconds of the clock. Isn't that amazing? So no matter where we are, that's how close we are to being really free. Some of what I'm going to speak about today. So Swamiji focuses this, anyway, I say that to give us all enormous hope and joy. I mean, 4 seconds on the whole clock. We've come a long way. Swamiji speaks in this reading, he alludes to Jesus coming, and he speaks to the about the Pharisees and the Orthodox religionists, I think he calls them. And of course he's talking about all of the Jewish people, because we all know Christ came, he was a rabbi, is really who he was. And he came, of course, exactly at the perfect moment, because the Jewish people, who were a really God-loving people, were lost. And I know those of you who've heard me speak, or Asha speak, or maybe any of us speak, have heard this a lot, but it's important as a takeoff point for today's, to understand today's reading. So the Jewish people, they were very good people. They loved God, they wanted to know God, but they really reached a point in their evolution as a people where they just simply got confused. The kings and the rabbis became one and the same. The part of the rabbis that was playing the kingly role got much more interested in material wealth and possession. It really confused the Jewish people because they wanted to treat their rabbis well, but everything started tumbling backwards from when Moses had been there to a place of material preoccupation again. And that's the moment when Jesus came. Because as we say in our festival every week, a prayer of love went up and you responded. Jesus came to speak to that segment of the Jewish population who knew they were in trouble. That was not everybody. Had that been everybody, the story would not have been that he got crucified, of course. Had that been everybody, he might not even have needed to take a human body at the time. But he came because there were a few, some group, who knew that they needed the light of God's presence in this earth again. Now, until that time, the Jewish people had been living very much according to God's law. And God's law had come to them in the form of the 10 Commandments, which we all know, along with 684 other laws. That's a lot of laws and rules that you have to follow every day. And it was taken like that. It wasn't like Thich Nhat Hanh, who has a prayer, a prayer that you can use before you open the door, a prayer before you wash your hands, really to help you remember God's presence. They were rules. You don't eat milk and meat. You wear your hair a certain way. You keep your head covered. I mean, you could just go on. And it was very hard and fast rules because they were coming out of slavery and they needed a lot of guidance. And then Jesus appeared, and Jesus said, I'm not coming to dispute anything Moses said to you. Moses was an avatar. He said, but I'm coming to help you move back into a place of your heart, into truth and grace. I'm coming to help you remember that you will not know your own divine nature if you continue to just think, here's a rule, here's a rule, here's a rule. I have to study, 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 which, by the way, the Jewish people were also very good at. They still are. I remember Dunbar saying to me one time many years ago, he said, the Jewish people are such a highly educated people, which as a rule is really true. They place a lot of importance on being well educated. And he was asking me, why is that? And I think, well, thousands of years ago, they really had to study. It's just, I don't know if that's what started it all. But as long as we can trace back Jewish history, it's been a very learned people. And Christ came and said, we have to help you get out of your head and into your hearts, into that place of devotion, which Swamiji mentioned in the reading, and then, of course, paired up with our quality of the week, which is devotion, saying you cannot take a step forward on the spiritual path. As Sri Yukteswar said, you cannot put one foot in front of the other on the spiritual path, not take even one step if you're not moving from a place of your heart's devotion. So Jesus came and he basically said, you will not know these teachings. There is no way, right in the midst of his saying, I and my Father are one, everything I am, you are too. But then he said, don't be confused. You're not going to learn it in books. You can study as much as you want, because they were Talmudic scholars studying the Talmud, which is, if you will, the Jewish Bible. I mean, the Old Testament was really the Jewish Bible, but these Talmudic teachings is what they were studying all the time. And Jesus came and he said, no, what I'm saying to you when I say everything I am, you are too, and more. So Jesus is there saying, I and my Father are one. I'm here as a manifestation of divine energy, but everything I am, you are too. Meaning we are all that, and it will take intuitive perception. You have to get to that place of remembering, not with your mind, but through your heart, through your intuition, through inspiration, who you are. And that is how you hear or know God. So when Jesus was saying, for those who have ears to hear, his teachings were for those who had ears to hear, he meant for those whose hearts were open, who could take these lessons, not even what he was saying. You know, just like Swami Kriyananda told us, Master spoke a lot in the world. He went out, he lectured all the time. But when he was with his main disciples, the monks and the nuns in Mount Washington, he didn't speak very much at all. He said, come and meditate with me, which is precisely what David Eby was saying last night when he was trying to teach us to hear music beyond the notes. He was saying, you can study as much as you want. You know, there's a woman who's recently become part of the Ananda community. I think they actually came in through the family program, and I was asking her at one of those one day, what do you do in the world? And she said, I'm a musician. And I said, oh, what kind of a musician? She said, I'm a cellist. And I said to her, you know, David Eby's coming. You've got to meet him. And she said to me, well, I'd love to play. And I said to her, and this was a risk, she and I were repeating this last night, but intuitively I felt like I could say it. I said to her, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you some CDs, but you have to go home and you have to listen to this music over and over before you try and play it, because playing this music has nothing to do with your technical ability. You have to be playing from a point of inspiration, from a place of attunement with Swamiji and with Master. She took those CDs home, and she and her whole family have been listening and listening. She told me last night her little boy and little girl, Hugo, I don't know, Hugo looks to be about 3. She said they always say, Mommy, we love this music. There's light coming out of this music. The children say to her. So yesterday, David gave a workshop during the day. I came back for the concert at night, and I said to David, I'm so touched. I mean, here this man is a performer. I said, Jasmine just told me that you've invited her to play with you tonight. I mean, here he is putting on a concert. He said to me, oh, he said, we are graced by her presence. He said, Shanti, this woman studied at Peabody. She's extremely well-trained. And I just had to laugh because there I was saying to her, oh, you will, and I meant it, but and you know, right, oh no, you cannot play this music yet. But you know what, interestingly, I felt an instant of embarrassment, and then not, because she and I both knew it was true. She said, we've been listening over and over. I said to her, why are you not playing the cello professionally? She said, because I was waiting for this. She said, there's too much competition and ego in the world, and it never resonated with me. When David Eby teaches about sympathetic resonance, what a beautiful way of putting what we are talking about here. Not only can you not learn this through a book, and it's not just books, you know, because Swami titled this, By Understanding Can We Know God. It's not just through books. It's for all of the intellectual arguments people want to make all the time, all the specific questions. And I'm not saying we shouldn't question. Of course we should. But we should ask our questions from a place of not trying to disprove something, which is where people who are filled with doubt and people who actually don't really want any part of the spiritual path, no matter what they're thinking, they come with questions that are meant to do this. They come with their brow furrowed. And I mean it. You look at people who have been on the path for a long time. Their brows are not like that. You look at people who are always questioning. They're permanently, even when they're relaxed and smiling. Not because it's bad to ask questions, but it's great to ask questions as in, can you show me this? Can you teach me this? Can you show me the way? Open, wanting to learn. When you feel intuitively that something's making sense, every time you let your fear lead you, your doubt lead you, going back to just the books, and of course we all read. Many of us in this room have read at least half of what Swami's written, if not all of it. I mean, it's a lot. But we meditate, and then we read. You know, I just had a 3-week seclusion. Can somebody tell me when I need to be done speaking? I apologize, I didn't look at the clock. No, of course. All right, we're really going to have a practice here now of time being an illusion. And that's very dangerous, what Christy just said to me. Because I am Jewish. And we really know about talking.
YTT starts at 1 o'clock.
Okay. I just lost I lost where I was. Give me a minute. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, I just did a 3-week seclusion, which many of you know. And I decided in that seclusion, I went into it knowing that I wanted to study Patanjali. Honestly, I've avoided Patanjali most of my life because I've had no idea what he meant. I brought this book, and I'm going to tell you why. It is the most succinct version of the Vedas. The Vedas are huge. They're enormous. And you know the Mahabharata is based on the Vedas, and then the Bhagavad Gita is a condensation of the Vedas, and then there's Patanjali. And there's just no way in the world, truthfully, if you're not a realized master already, if you're not Yogananda, or a Yogananda-like, Christ-like, but there's no way to understand it because Patanjali does what Master did with his disciples. He just wants you to attune yourself to him, and when you know the truth, you'll know what he's saying. But he does something like this. He'll say, the vrittis meaning those whirlpools of energy that exist in us, by the millions or trillions, I don't know who could count them. They're lifetimes of accumulated tendencies. They're both conscious, the things we know that we like or dislike, and they're totally unconscious, but they drive us. And sometimes those vrittis are driving us towards the light, and very often they're driving us away from the light, whether we know it or not. And very often in many people's lives, it's unconscious and it's out of control anyway. when people try and get conscious about it, they can't. It's everything that exists in our chakras. It's everything that makes us exactly who we are. And it's from the most gross to the most subtle form of that. And he says the vrittis are calmed by practice and by non-attachment. And then you listen to Jyotish and Devi or Asha, or I went online, people who have taught Patanjali for a long time, and they speak for hours and hours about that sentence so that we can begin to understand it. You see? So I decided that I would study Patanjali, because now Swami Kriyananda wrote this beautiful book called Demystifying Patanjali, where he literally does that. He demystifies Patanjali's teachings. And it's just made it so much more available to us. So what I did is I would read the sutra or the line. I would sit and meditate for an hour, and then I would listen to 2 or 3 or 4 talks on it. And then I would read it again. So it's not that we don't read. It's that we are so limited. And I know we've all heard this many times. But let's face it, what we're here learning spiritually, it's so simple. The teachings are not that big. I mean, everybody could stand up every Sunday and say, meditate, and sit back down. And that would be the essence of the teaching. But we stand up here, or different people give different classes, or we talk to each other, however it happens, and we just try and find new ways of saying it. We try and feel the inspiration, let it flow through us. The vehicle is blessed by that which flows through you, Swami says. And we're talking about the same things over and over. When Patanjali says it, it gets right down to that inarguable essence. But like the Buddha said, the mind that would ask the questions cannot understand the answer. And that's not an insult to us. It's simply the truth. And when we don't know it, it's because we're just stuck in our minds. Okay, fair enough. That's part of what we're doing with all these lives. But it is never going to take us to that place of yoga. That place that Patanjali is saying in 200 sutras, here is the how to get to, as I said at the beginning, for all of us who now really deeply want to have an experience of the divine. We do not want to live our lives the way we've been living. You know, I had an experience some months ago, and I really want to shorten it, but I want to show you because it's like everyday life. I had a very dear friend who was right near the end of her life. She died November 18th, so this was a week into November. She was down in the Bay Area, but she wanted to get home to Sea Ranch to die. So with a lot of effort, because she'd been down here very sick with this cancer for over a year, she had so much stuff moved down here, and her son and I one day pack everything up. He gets into her car. He's going to drive her back up to Sea Ranch, 3.5, 4 hours up the coast. I'm going to get into my car, drive up behind them. We're going to get up there, get her settled. I'm going to conduct a little service up there with her. She's dying. She's leaving her body. I don't know if I'll see her again. One of my dearest friends. And then he and I have to get home that night. So I get onto the Golden Gate Bridge, and my car starts making a horrific noise. I called Barry, and I said, you got to find a place nearby for me that'll work on my Volvo. Something's wrong. And I prayed to Master, get me across the bridge. Anyway, again, I'm shortening the story. I make it into Petaluma. I pull into Whole Foods in Petaluma because Barry had found me this place, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was something like, we love you, we'll help you, mechanics. It was close to that. I said to him when he read it, that's the one, that's the one. I was going to make it to him. I pull into Whole Foods, and all these men come running up because I didn't realize this horrible noise that I'm hearing in my car is way worse outside. And I get out, and they're all around me, and like that. And I said, wow, this sounds terrible. And they said, it is horrible. You can't drive this car. What are you going to do? I said, right now I'm hungry. I'm going to go in and get a bite of food. And they're looking at me, these 4 or 5 men, like, here's this serious problem, lady. You're not getting it. And I'm thinking to myself, no, I'm getting it, but I'm hungry and I'm going to go have a bite to eat. Anyway, and then they say to me, you can't go to that place if we love you and we'll treat you and your car well, because it's 4 miles down the road. And I said, no, I'm going. I eat my lunch. I get back in the car. I pray to Master. I get there, and everybody hears my car right away. Anyway, it's 100 degrees in Petaluma. My friends are already out on Route 1. I can't reach them. She's dying. And I'm telling this story like this, but this is the kind of story that would really upset people. And I'm telling you this for a reason. So I go into this place, and they were right. They were really wonderful people. I sit down. They make me popcorn. We're schmoozing. 4.5 hours later, they tell me my car's a really serious problem. There's no way they can get parts from Volvo. And my friends are, in the meantime, hopefully home. I walk 3 miles in 100 degrees. I rent a car. I drive up the coast. Get my friend's son, get her settled, get him home. And about 3 days later, I drive back up to pick up my car and return this rental car. So a friend of mine goes with me. And we walk into the mechanics. Everybody, the guy's work, I swear to you, it's true, comes running out. Shanti, we're so glad to see you. They're throwing their arms around me. Now, this isn't really about me. This is about these teachings. And my friend said to me, what happened here? And they said to her, we've never seen anything like it. People are here when they're having car trouble. Nobody's happy. This cost her almost $2,000. She was totally at ease, eating popcorn, playing, joking, happy with us. We told her about her car. She said, okay, gee, I'll have to walk and get a rental car. Of course, that's what I did. That's what maybe many of us would do. But that's not what the vast majority of people in the world would do. What the vast majority of people in the world would do would be incredibly upset. You know the things that upset people every day, every little thing? And guess what? Us too. That was a day where it was so obviously out of my hands. It gave me time to say, okay, Shanti, how are you going to deal with this? You know? Are you going to be in joy? Because you're going to go through it no matter how you deal with it. All we ever walk away from, all that matters. Can you think right now of all the things you worried about last week? Things or last month that you thought were horrible or interrupting your day or your flow? You can hardly remember them. All that matters is how we dealt with it, how we grow through it, what we take away from it. And we can learn that in the moment, but only, as Patanjali says, by calm practice and by non-attachment. But I'm saying it to you because book learning doesn't give you that. Book learning gives you what most people have. And what I was starting to say when I went into that story is that no matter how, we don't think most of us as our lives as suffering. Things aren't horrible. So when we're 35 and playing and having a great time and loving life, we can say, of course I want to come back. But by now we can say, oh, this is what Master meant by anguishing monotony, by getting so bent out of shape when our refrigerator breaks, or when the car breaks down, or when one of our children gets sick, or whatever it is. Every little thing stops us until we transcend all of that, until we move into this place. And I'm going to tell you one more story and then I'll stop. There's a book out now called Stroke of Insight. Has anybody read the book? Okay. Here's what I want to say to you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. The woman who wrote the book, this Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, is really remarkable. She's a neuroanatomist. Brilliant. A Harvard neuroanatomist. I'm telling you this because she's smart. She went into neuroanatomy because her brother had schizophrenia. And she was very close with her brother. And she wanted to understand. She wanted to understand why she could have a thought or a desire or a fantasy or a wish, and very often manifests that in the world. And why her schizophrenic brother, who she loved, could not do that. What was different in his brain than in her brain? So she became a neuroanatomist, and she's brilliant. And she was at Harvard, and she woke up one morning getting ready to go to work to do the studies that she was doing, and she started having a bizarre experience. Now, I'm not going to go through it. She tells it beautifully in an 18-minute TED Talk. So you just Google Stroke of Insight, and you'll find her, and you listen to this 18-minute TED Talk. But here's what I want to say. This woman who had lived completely in her mind, one of the best minds in the world, began to have this experience, and she describes exactly how it unfolded. And the experience was of having the left side of her brain, the thinking, rational, detail-oriented, worrying about everything in the world the way we do. We obsess with worrying, anxiety, fear. I've got to do this, I've got to do that, schedules, all in the left brain. Over a period of 4 hours, she lost the left hemisphere of her brain completely. And this woman consciously moved into an experience of being free of all of that and of living in the right side of her brain, which is pure intuition, pure expansion, pure love. She says, at least I'll use this stand for one reason, for 1 minute here. This is what she wrote somewhere. Thoughts no longer a constant stream of chatter. And she talks a lot about this stream of chatter. That's what our brains are like. I got to do this. Oh, wait a minute. Now, wait. Okay, I'm going to go shopping. I have to make dinner. Oh, darn. What time am I going to get back for dinner? Oh, man, I told him I'd be home at 6. Now I just remembered. Okay, well, that's how our brains are. That is what we do. A stream of chatter about the external world and her relationship to it. That stream of chatter, constant part of our day, ceased entirely. She wrote this in a book later. With it came a growing sense of peace. She said, I felt enfolded by a tranquil euphoria. She calls it nirvana in this TED Talk. She's talking about what happens when you let go, when you can even step away from, for moments, that part of our brain that keeps us in our mind. She's talking about meditation. But she didn't know that. She's talking about yoga. She's talking about how we actually know God, which is just that place of peace and love and joy. How many people have said to me, I mean, here I am just like everybody else, and for anybody who's tried to be with me a lot, a veritable pain in the rear end most of the time, and as neurotic as anybody, and people have said to me, I'd like to live more like you. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with what they feel coming through me in those moments where, thank God, without having a blood clot the size of a golf ball take over the left side of my brain, she said, I felt this sense of tranquil euphoria, felt an expanded sense of grace. Instead of being locked into being Jill and all that defined Jill, that's all that defines us, all that we just do unconsciously, as I said, all that we've become. She said, I felt a sense of being at one with the universe and all that is. And she said, and suddenly I knew those words to be true. Totally in the present and in the presence of grace. Now, what she goes on to say in this TED Talk is it took her 8 years to go through rehab. She said, I came out an absolute non-functional child in an adult body. 8 years later, now it's more than 8 years, she's giving this TED Talk that's going to blow you all away when you watch it. But at the end, she says, what I realized is that without having that stroke, we have a choice. We can each make that choice to live in love, in peace. She calls it nirvana. I found nirvana, and I could choose. Did I want to jump over here and live from the left side, or did I want to move over here away from the influence of the left side of my brain? And I could make that choice every moment of every day. I did not have to have this stroke. She says to the audience, we all could. What do you choose? What are you going to choose? That is the answer of knowing God. It's not knowing something out here. It's knowing the essence of who we already are. And she just puts it out there so clearly. And David Eby took us there in less than 2 minutes last night. And I'm telling you, it's the truth. That was filmed. If he lets it go up, I had to leave before it was over, so I'm praying he lets, well, I actually know the videographer, so I'm going to watch it one way or another. But you know, I want to just say to everybody, I mean, because it came to me, what else would I say today? Every time you go to be anxious or to worry, because what is a fear-based life is such a bummer. And that's what all that is. It's fear-based. It's not soul-based. And that soul-basedness is absolutely available to every one of us every minute of every day. There is a choice. Move to the right. That's what she's saying. Get out of the left. And we have the techniques. Listen, Patanjali says it. Everybody says it. I'm going to end with this. I'm so sorry I've gone on a little long, and I know. But I am going to end with this. If we think for 1 minute that we're going to be able to go after this problem, then that problem, then this problem, then this aspect of our personality, then that one, I'm going to work really hard and get on top of it. Guess what, guys? We've been doing that for 10 million lives. And I mean that. Master said it. It's the truth. And we have a choice to make now. We can easily do it for 10 million more. It's okay. God's patient. He knows we're coming home. And we can choose that. Or we can say, let me take whatever little bit of time I have left in this life. Let me do it right now. Why not? Why would anybody not spend 5 or 10 or 15 minutes a day, if not more? Just literally. I mean, it sounds crazy, but she put it into words. And she said at the end, she said she got it. This is meditation. She didn't say what that physicist said that I talk about sometimes, who said, we're beginning to think this is God. This meaning, what are these little tiny particles that they're discovering of energy? She just said, I realize I have access to this. This is a choice that I make. I really can find ways to let go, to step out of the left side of my brain. We all have that choice. We all have to be making that choice more and more. I don't care who's in this room. Cass, I hope I don't embarrass you. He's probably the youngest person here. It's not a lot of time left in life, no matter whether you're his age or my age. It's not a lot of time. And we're in the last 4 seconds. We can see the finish line. You know, that's where we need to hold our attention. It's all right here. There's nothing else to do. You sit quietly. Every time you say, bring your attention to the point between the eyebrows. They're not just words. 5 or 10 minutes of meditation, of loving God, of opening your heart. And it's transformational.